everybody! I'm super excited to share with you my top 5 favorite of all time mechanics. So these are the things that I love in games, the specific aspects that in some of my cases, my examples, you're going to actually see 2 of my favorite mechanics in the same game, which love it. But I am excited to share those with you. I will give you some of my runners up towards the end. I'm also going to share with you a couple examples of the games that have these mechanics with my number 1 example favorite game that showcases that particular mechanic. My number 5 favorite mechanic is bag building. Now I know that under Board Game Geek it states that bag building, deck building, all of those kinds of buildings are all kind of in the same category. I particularly like bag building because I get to reach into bags and pull things out. If you've been watching some of my videos, you know that I really love reaching in bags and pulling stuff out. The great thing about bag building is I get to design my own bag and what I put in it. Therefore, when I get a chance to pull things out, there's just so much excitement about the unknown and about hopefully getting everything that you've put in your bag at just the right time, in the right sequence, so that you can maximize your turn. A couple examples of bag building include automobiles, coffee roaster, Hyperborea, Warp's Edge, Quarriers, Meeples and Monsters, War Chest, Sorcerer City, Talisman, Legendary Tales. But for me, the game that exhibits bag building at its best is the Quacks of Quedlinburg. Yeah, that's right. So in the Quacks of Quedlinburg, everyone's playing a charlatan and you build your bag with all of these different kinds of potions. And each of these potions can differ from game to game based on which tablet you choose. And I think that makes the game super replayable. And so you put all these potions in your bag and one at a time you draw out these potions and they move your marker on this cauldron in this kind of tornado, this like cyclone fashion, and you're building out and out and out, getting more and more victory points, hopefully, and more buy points so that you can invest in even more potions that are more valuable, maybe move you further along, maybe earn you victory points, get you little red gems. This game has bag building at its heart. It is the main mechanic in the game, and there's just nothing like reaching in a bag and pulling out the good stuff. But then again, there's always that chance that a whole round could go by and all you do is draw the white ones, and the white ones are essentially your press your luck marker. So if you exceed 7 points of the value on your white potions as you pull them out, your pot explodes and you only get half of the rewards for that round, which means you either get victory points or you get money to invest in more potions for the next round. The game lasts 8 rounds. There are cool event cards that you can use. There are ways to hopefully prevent your cauldron from exploding. There's the Witch's Brew expansion. So many fun things to love about the Quacks of Quedlinburg. And when you get the bonus chits, when you get the plastic pieces that, I mean, plastic kind of sounds ugh, but they're so lovely. They feel wonderful in your hands. They feel wonderful when you're reaching and you're grabbing your potions. They sit pretty on your cauldron. So make sure you get the additional bits and pieces that go with Quacks. It is costly. It's almost as expensive as the game itself, but if you play Quacks as much as we do and you love sharing it with other people, you will get your money's worth and then some, because it's just wonderful playing with the upgrade of the plastic chips that come for Quacks of Quedlinburg. My 4th favorite mechanic is something called Cube Tower. Now there really aren't a whole slew of games that do it, but when you do see it in a game, it's kind of the focal point. It is the coolest aspect of the game, and I think it's so clever for a variety of reasons. So a cube tower is literally a built tower, generally out of really thick cardstock, and it has all of these different levels and layers and floors in it that create obstacles for cubes to go down it, much like you have a dice tower. So you drop your cubes in, and then some spit out down at the bottom, but some of them get stuck in nooks and crannies in your cube tower. The thing I like about this the most is there's a little bit of unpredictability, and there's also, generally with most uses of the cube tower, benefits to getting those cubes coming out later, even though at the time when you really want them to come out, they don't. So there's a little bit of a hit, but then later it can be really beneficial. And that really makes up for like a bad roll. Well, if you have a bad roll with a cube tower, the rest of the roll that you thought you were going to have that was good comes out later, and that's really cool. Some examples of cube towers are Stygian Society, Shogun, which is the reskin of Wallenstein, Immortals, Mord im Arosa, and Amerigo. I think Queen Games might be onto something because they have half of my cube tower games, and so yay for that company knowing what is neat and cool and kind of what gamers want. Well, this gamer. So my pick for representing cube towers, which is again my number 4 favorite mechanic, is Edge of Darkness. This has just a great cube tower because part of the cube tower is the display of creatures that you can attack as well. And so cards are put up on this display with the cube tower, and you drop your cubes, and then everything's going to come out and you're going to resolve those things. But in Edge of Darkness, it's really balanced and clean and just a fantastic example of how you can incorporate this particular mechanic into your game and pair it with card sleeving. That means layering your cards. What makes Edge of Darkness a really great pick for the cube tower is that the cube tower in this has 3 different exits, and they go into different pools. And you have to really keep track of what's in those pools and how they're going to activate the baddies. And there's just something really cool about not just one spout at the end that kind of just like has a pool of everything that goes through the tower. The cubes divide inside the tower where you can't see them, and then goes into different areas at the bottom. So it's really cool. It's super fun. You can play so many different games with different cards in them and still have that core mechanic of the cube tower in every single game because it's essential to the way that you battle. I think it's just fun and clever and super cool, and this game is just awesome. My 3rd favorite mechanic is a rondelle system. I think rondelles are pretty cool. I really do. Because what you get to do on your turn is move, generally, this is how rondelles work, a certain amount of spaces. In a lot of them it's 1 to 3. In some you can actually pay resources to go further, and in others you can't. You can't go any further than the max amount of spaces. And you're moving in a circle, and so when you move your pawn a certain number of spaces, you're trying to get to an action that you want. And so everyone's on the rondelle at different times. You are activating different things and different choices, and you get to do that thing. That's all you get to do. It's just a really simple, clean way of making sure that players are planning out their turns and making the best of their turns. Because on most rondelle systems, you want to stop at every single space, and you just can't. That's not how you win the game. You can't just stop and go one space every time and just do everything in the order that the game puts it in. They want you to move around and to really have to make choices and to really press yourself. And so games that have a rondelle system include Antique, Crown of Emara, Glasgow, Glenmore, Hamburgo, Imperial, The Red Cathedral, Queen's Architect, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom. These games are just right in my wheelhouse of juicy medium strategy games. That's what I'm looking for when I have this rondelle system. It's a way of saying here are these set actions that everybody can take, and then every player just takes them when they want to, but only when they're available to them based on their placement in the board. So for me, a perfect example of the rondelle is a sneaky rondelle. You may not recognize it as a rondelle at first, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. So for me, the game that represents a rondelle system is my example simply because it is so clever in the way it implements a rondelle. It is the Great Western Trail. Yeah, this is a rondelle system. You start at the bottom of the map, of the board, and you work your way all the way up to Kansas City, sell your cattle, and start back over again. And everyone's moving on the rondelle at different times, and you're essentially moving as many spaces as you can. There are ways to move further and faster, but you have to use essentially resources to upgrade those, and you don't have to. But everyone's going to Kansas City and selling at different times, and you could lap people, who cares? You get to just do the action based on how far you can go. Great Western Trail does this so well, and I think it's super smart. It's a great game. It gets me, I get it. I've also talked a lot about how much I appreciate Alexander Pfister's games. But this one in particular captures the rondelle super well, and I think it's a great example of my third favorite mechanic. My second favorite mechanic is programming cards. Now, that to me is like the best puzzle. So it totally gets closer to the top of my charts for my favorite mechanics, because when you have cards and you have to essentially program when you do them, if you do them, where you do them, to what degree do you do them, that to me is just the best. I want to be in charge of my own engine. I want to be in charge of my own actions. I want to know what I'm doing and when I'm doing it, and I want it to just all be right there for me to plan. And so that's why this really goes up high on my list. Some great examples of programming cards and actions include Game of Thrones, Kaigan, Nidavellir, Lords of Zidit, Colt Express, Quirky Circuits, Space Cadets, and Robo Rally. These are fantastic examples because you can tell that programming cards can be a cooperative adventure. It can be an individual competitive adventure. It could be a super easy game that's light and goofy, or it can be a really involved, deep, hearty game. So the programming cards / actions is just so versatile. The representative game for programming cards could have been used for my previous favorite mechanic of Cube Tower. Have you guessed it yet? It is Shogun. That's right, Shogun. So this has a cube tower. Love it. It also is programming. Players have a board in front of them that will trigger one after the other after the other. So there is a sequence of actions that will go, but you get to choose your actions. The actions are on location cards. These are locations on the board. In the middle of all of these actions, players are going to start getting each other's way. They're going to start attacking and stealing and raiding. And so that means that you need to plan your actions when you want to do them, to gather resources, to take over locations, to do what you want to do so that the rest of your actions make sense. It's kind of a domino, and you will plan all of them, all 10 of your locations that have associated actions. You will put them down in particular spaces. And it is just honestly the best example of programming cards that I have played. It is stunning, and because it has a cube tower, it's extra stunning. This is a favorite game. This is in my top 10. Shogun is perfect for programming, but all the other examples I talked about really do maximize that programming cards / actions that just works for strategy, for just that individual, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna figure this out? It's a puzzle to me, and I love that puzzle so much. Alright, so it's time for me to slow down and just talk about a couple of my runners up. Now, I had 3 mechanics that I really like, but didn't make my top 5. I still think they're super great. So here they are with a couple game examples. My first runner-up is Mancala. Now, much like a rondelle, there is a system that works on this circle, but a rondelle essentially is just one marker that tracks your actions, and you can generally move 1 to 3 spaces and do that particular action. In a Mancala, you are moving bits and pieces. You're taking one and you're moving it as far away As the pips on the die state or the location, there might be multiple workers there and you move it that far away. However it works, the Mancala is going to allow you to activate spaces by moving bits that you have multiple pieces of in a variety of places. A couple of examples of a Mancala system are Finca, Trajan, Gold West, Five Tribes, the Great Zimbabwe, Plains, and Robber Knights. So I really enjoy a Mancala system. Another mechanic that's a favorite of mine is a turn order time track. Okay, so let me explain this because it's actually kind of rare. It's not in a lot of games, but the way it works, think about Nova Luna. The player whose pawn is furthest behind on the time track gets to go. And every time you take an action, there are a certain number of spaces you move based on how powerful that action is. And as long as you're the last pawn, you get to take as many turns as you want until you're not the last pawn, and then the last pawn goes. So players are taking turns out of order. They might even take multiple turns before other players get to do things. So the examples for this are Nova Luna, Thebes, and Glenmore, which I think all three of those games are stunning. I love all three of those games. So if you've never done the turn order time track, definitely check out those three games I mentioned. The last mechanic that I really adore and I will always play if you mention it, pick up and deliver. I like getting things in one place and then taking them to another place. This is your classic train game. I have Rails on my computer and sometimes I will just sit and watch nonsense TV and just play Rails. And it's just like grab these oranges and then build your tracks and build over here and then take those oranges to those people. And so it's just something that is super satisfying to me because what you're trying to do is puzzle out how efficiently can I make my rails, how fast can I deliver my goods, and how much do I get for turning in my goods so that I can invest in more tracks and more, trains taking things from here to there. So a couple examples. You probably don't need any, but here's some pick up and deliver games. Empire Builder, Istanbul, Age of Steam, Railways of the World, Kings of Air and Steam, Hansa, Mercator, Steam, First Train to Nuremberg, and Iron Dragon. Oh, I'm so excited to move on to my number one favorite game mechanic. Now, I really enjoy the general category that this falls into, but mine is a little bit more specific. It is worker placement with dice workers. So this means that players have dice, and whether they roll them or set them to a particular side, they then use those workers to allocate them to actions that garner them resources or other kinds of benefits or actions. A couple examples of this mechanic are Roll for the Galaxy, Crystal Palace, Discoveries, Alien Frontiers, The Artemis Project, Fantastic Factories, Kingsburg, The Rise of Queensdale, and Under Falling Skies. Those games are all really wonderful in their own right, and I think they absolutely showcase the worker placement with dice workers. But for me, the number one game that exhibits this particular mechanic and happens to be my overall favorite game of all time is The Castles of Burgundy. That's right, if you've seen my top 50, you know that my number one game, The Castles of Burgundy. So what happened was I played this game a while ago, when it first came out, and I thought, wow, this is a game that values my ones and my twos. I kind of notoriously roll low, and this showed me that pips can mean different things at different times in different places, and sixes aren't the only thing that you want. And so I love the way the dice work in this. You can essentially put your dice out to grab tiles and place them in your kind of storage area. You can place dice to place workers from your storage area to your play area, which you're building your castles in your area. You can also use dice to ship and to send off those goods that you've received. And you can use dice to gain workers. There's just so many things you can do, and your dice are never wasted. So even if you don't get anything that you want, just grab a couple workers. Workers are always going to help you adjust your dice up or down one for the next time that you kind of get stuck, or you really need a particular die and you're looking for it and you can't roll it. You have 5 turns per round and 5 rounds to do everything that you want to do in the game. And you're always building your own castle. There are wonderful configurations, different maps you can use so that you never get stuck in the same particular map. The way you draw tiles from the bag and place them into the particular areas. It's all just so replayable, and it has to this day lasted as my favorite game for quite a while, and it hasn't budged, it hasn't moved. And so for me, the perfect example of worker placement with dice workers. Alright, there it is. Those are my top 5 favorite mechanics, with my number 1 example that really showcases that particular mechanic. What do you think about the games I selected, and what mechanics are you a fan of? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.